Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Front Row with Jelani Stokes. Of course, I'm Jelani Stokes, and welcome again to this third episode. So I'm excited today. I'm super excited about this topic today, and I think you guys are going to enjoy this one. But before we get into that, I just want to let everybody know again that Front Row goes live every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Okay. If you want to get in on the live discussion, if you want to get your thoughts out live with me, Jelani, then come on down every 6 p.m. every Tuesday. I'll be right here to answer all your questions and join the conversation. And make sure that you also remember that every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I have new videos that drop that talks about some of your wonderful artists that you guys enjoy. So keep those notification bells going because it's always going to let you know whenever I get a new video every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And make sure before you go, if you have any questions you would love to ask me that I can answer live right here for you on Front Row, please email me at askjelanistokes@gmail.com. Again, that's askjelanistokes@gmail.com. All right. So today, we're going to go ahead and get started with one of my segments that I love to do because it features one of these great songs that I love so much. This is called, ladies and gentlemen, real quick. See, I'm doing this on my own because I'm running solo today, but ain't nothing wrong with that today. But this segment I like to call I Want You to Know. All right, today, what do I want you guys to know? Well, today was pretty a good day. You know, my Bengals got a chance to sign that right tackle to solidify that line. Yes, we're going back to the Super Bowl. I can't wait for that. I've been working on some brand new arrangements that you guys are going to love. Been working on some Stevie Wonder, some Queen. I've been working on some Bee Gees and some, a Lionel Richie classic. And I can't wait to share those with you guys because those are some of my all-time favorite songs. So I'm going to share my acapella arrangements with you guys. And I'm also been recording some new bass jams because, you know, I haven't played bass in so long and just had a chance to just really jam out on my bass. You know, I get a chance to play for my church, which I love, but man, I just haven't had a chance to jam out to some of these great songs that I love. So that's pretty much what I want you to know what's going on in my life. And once again, I want to thank the group First Cousin for providing us with this great song. I want you to know, go check it out on Spotify. It's a great song. I had a chance to write it and love it. One of my all-time favorite songs. So today, since I'm going solo, and you know, I didn't, as you know, people work, you know, people have things to do. And and at this time I said, you know what, I think it'd be great to talk about one of the subjects that I've been constantly replying to people on, especially on my latest Bee Gees videos, is talking about disco. And I find disco so fascinating. So we're going to have a discussion about disco. So if you're out there in the chat and you want to just chime in and talk about and put in your 2 cents, please feel free. I got the chat up right in front of me. I see it live as day. So we're going to keep it rocking like this, and we're going to get started off in this way. Check this out. All right.
Field, at which time.
All right, that wasn't supposed to happen, but let's try this again. Here we go. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go all the way back to July 1979, July 12th, 1979, Thursday. Ladies and gentlemen, this was at Kaminsky Park in Chicago, Illinois. It was the Disco Demolition Night. Now, let me tell you, at least 50,000 people packed the stadium when they were only expecting around 20. And these people came with their disco records and they would buy disco records. And what they basically did is they put this whole pile of disco records in the middle of the field and they just blew it up. Okay. And that was such an important part of what really kind of ended disco. And you kind of ask yourself, like, okay, so what would drive people to go to that length to express how much they dislike some music. The only times I can remember is when an artist was being accused or was actually caught doing something heinous, where it literally is like, you've got to condemn that person. So we're going to condemn you by, destroying your records. I mean, these were people who have done nothing. So how did we get here? Okay. So the way we got here is this. I think it's something that we always see in society when something becomes really popular, we tend to become copycats. My father likes to say, um, when they first come out, you got Coca-Cola, then you got to have Pepsi, then you got to have RC. If something popular comes out, someone else is always going to try to replicate that success. And that's always going to happen. And I think this was the prime example here, was right here during the disco era, 1979. So to me, and this is my definition of disco, and I've had to think about this a lot. Disco to me was a accessible way. I'm sorry, I had to think of the word. Disco was an accessible way for people to write, produce, and record R&B music. Let me say that again. Disco was a way for anybody to produce, write, and record R&B music. Okay? They streamlined what you needed to do as far as creating the template for the sound, and they just would put anybody on it. That's my current definition, because when I listen to disco, I like all disco because I love R&B and funk music. I love it. So when I hear disco tracks, I get excited because it's got all of the elements that an R&B track would have. But they gave it this shiny veneer called disco. So, how do we get to disco? So let's run it back real quick, okay? And this is my perception. If you have anything out there that where you feel is different, or if I'm wrong, please, please, please put something in the chat. Let's have a discussion about this, because I love learning new things and I love to share my opinions and hear the opinions of others. So I think R&B music has always been popular. Blues music has always been popular. And if you look throughout history, it's always been something that a wider audience would always gravitate to, but it may not be as accessible for everybody to enjoy, not just enjoy, but write, create, and actually be embedded in it. So they would find ways around that. For example, think about the early 50s when you've got people like Little Richard and Chuck Berry and people of that nature. And you've got other people like Elvis Presley or Pat Boone covering their songs. These songs were loved, but for some reason, and I'm not going to get into the overall context of, you know, of race. I'm not going to go there, okay? But I will say this: those artists, Elvis, Pat Boone, made that music more accessible to everybody. And then you get to Motown, and Berry Gordy's main number one um, uh, edict, or just kind of like mission with Motown, was to make music for the young America and make music accessible to everybody. So they made this R&B music accessible to everybody. That's why people love classic Motown. They love it. I mean, some of the biggest bands that we revere to this day, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan, will all cite Motown artists as people they looked up to. In particular, Smokey Robinson. I mean, Bob Dylan even said Smokey Robinson's the greatest poet ever. Go look it up. He said it. Okay. So there's always been this fascination with R&B music. Then you get into the 70s. and you really get into the Philadelphia sound, or they call it Philly soul, which was Gamble and Huff, and Tom Bell and Linda Creed, who had the Spinners, the Stylistics, the Delphonics, um, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, all of these groups that would have these luscious arrangements with this strong backbeat behind them, which made it really danceable. Okay. So you're starting to get some of that coming in the 70s. And then I always remember I was reading up on the Jackson 5, and I think I was looking up some of their albums. And their album called Skyrider was an out was their last album where they really had that bubblegum sound, like that really bubblegum young sound. And they by that point they were all Michael was the youngest. He was 14, 15. I'm like, they like, we're not babies anymore. This is not us. So they decided to switch. And then starting in 1973 on their Get It Together album, I've read in a lot of publications, they call this a disco concept album because it does have all of the elements of disco. And I'm going to break those elements down in a second. And this was 73. So it was really kind of like this pumping up of this danceable type of music, but it wasn't just there just yet. Okay. So you have this underbelly. And then also, let's talk about what's going on during the world, especially in the United States. At this time, the Vietnam War is just ending. You had just years and years of unrest, of protesting and civil rights and, you know, people just against the war. And you had all of this angst and anger. And by 73, 74, we were out of the Vietnam War. I'm not going to say civil rights was over, but we have done a lot. And I believe, you know, a lot of people just started to go right back within and kind of look at their own lives. I even got a quote from a movie. It was a great movie. He said one of his buddies went off to prison like at 67, came back to 73, went up to his homeboy, said, man, what's going on with the revolution? And his homeboy said, man, ain't happening no more, young blood. Yeah. So things were changing. And this is my opinion. Anybody who was there, you could tell me. By that point, people were tired of the fight and they wanted to just have fun. So this music that was danceable with the mindset of let's have fun. And then you had the underground discotheques, where people were going out and they were having fun. And these DJs would be running these records, which would get people on the dance floor. And people were just going out and having a good time. So all of this underbelly started to create this danceable type of music that we would become disco. Still up until this point, we're about 74. It's still R&B and funk, okay? Now, this is where I think it changed, okay? In 1974, 75, one of my favorite groups, the Bee Gees, were at a crossroads. And you can look at this in my Bee Gees videos because I break it down on a lot of their videos. They hooked up with a producer named Arif Mardan, who was recommended by Robert Stigwood, their manager and leader of their record label. Arif was an R&B producer. Let me say that again. He was an R&B producer. He worked with people like Aretha Franklin. He worked with Donny Hathaway, and I'm trying to figure out some more people because I don't want to leave some people out because he really, really worked with a lot of just the current R&B sound that you guys would know. So, if I kind of get lost a little bit, I apologize because I'm doing two things at once, but I want to get this stuff out to you. So, he was just a known R&B producer, and he got with the Bee Gees. So, they did two albums. First was Mr. Natural, then it was Main Course. Main Course was the one that broke him out of the mold, okay? And the story with Jive Talking, go check out my Jive Talking video. To make a long story short, they put the album out without their name. People thought it was funky and hot. They said it was the Bee Gees. They're like, wow. And then bam, they're off to the races, okay? Listen to Main Course. To me, there's nowhere close to disco. That is just R&B and funk unadulterated. Pure and simple. I mean, my gosh, that was funky, okay? So they had this in them already because they were big fans of R&B music, Motown, Stax. We didn't really talk about Stax records. I'll get to them a little bit later with Otis Redding and oh my, he just Isaac Hayes and Sam and Dave, and I'm getting a lot of them. So they are big fans, so they have this music in them. So when they bring it out, it's like, whoa, dude, they can get down with this. All right. So we're how about 75, 76. Okay. So by this time, this whole idea of disco is really starting to percolate and bubble, right? And so people are starting to say, okay, okay. And then bam, Saturday Night Fever blew up. It's still one of the biggest soundtracks of all time. And that just blew it out the water. Okay. Now, but why call it disco? Well, first off, a lot of this music was being played in the discotheque. So I just think they just shortened it up to say disco to mean dance music, which really to me was R&B music. And let me explain. So here's the disco formula. The drum beat, basic. Now it can fluctuate, but you've got four on they call it four on the floor, eight on the hi-hat, and two on the snare. So four on the floor. So that means the kick drum it's always kicking the beat. And then you've got the hi-hat doing eight. And you got the snare hitting on every two and four. One, three, three, one, three. So and you get that basic beat, that basic house beat that's behind you. So once you put that down, then you got to get a driving bass line, a bass line that really moves the song. So then you get a guitar, a rhythm guitar lick, which really just solidifies that. And then you put that all together, get some nice keys, a lot of times Rhodes piano keys, electronic piano, and then bam, you got your basic disco track. So they figured out this formula that anybody could follow to make this type of music. Okay. So we got to the top. Here's what happened, in my opinion. Okay. 76, 77, I believe, was the peak of disco. By 78, 79, it's one of those things like when everybody knows something's popular, everybody's got to do it. Okay. And by that point, multiple if you are a popular artist and you are on the downturn of your career, right? Then you may consider I might have to do a disco record. Okay. So a lot of these artists, like I remember Rod Stewart, and I remember James Brown with the original Disco Man, and those are just two that pop off right off the top of my head that was started making disco records. I remember Chicago; they came out with a Street Player. I love that song, but it's disco as far as what the definition of disco is. And I think people were starting to get turned off by that because they would listen to these artists not to hear disco, but their respective genres. But a lot of these artists were downtrodden. They were in a downward slope. They needed a hit that was popular. So that's one thing. In the late 70s, I feel like it was the beginning, like the baby stages of modern media as we know it today. And what I mean by that is by that point, not everybody, but by that point, most people had a TV set. Okay. You had a little cable, not a lot, a little bit of cable. Remember, no MTV, not yet. Okay. You had radio, you had 8-track, you had record players. Okay. So there was a lot of extra media that would allow you to go ahead and listen to what you wanted to listen to, but not enough like today. See, today you can immerse yourself in any type of just universe you want and just wall yourself up and never have to leave it. Okay. I'm talking about in the car. I mean, podcast, digital radio, satellite radio, um, Spotify, YouTube Music, Pandora, all of them. You can just immerse yourself. In 1979, now you was going to drive and you was going to listen to that radio station. And a lot of times there wasn't a lot of choices. So think about this. You're driving to work, okay? I'm driving to work, yeah. And then you turn the radio station and you're like, oh, disco. Okay. I want to turn that off. I don't want to hear it. And then all the other stations have formats you just don't like. Okay. So you turn back up and you're like, okay, let me see if it's going again. Oh, no, not another disco. And then you turn it back down. Okay. And then, oh, and then by the time you're at work, you really could not get away from disco no matter how much you tried. Okay. And I think for a lot of people, it got to be so much saturation because unlike today where you can get away from it, you couldn't get away from it. It was everywhere. Movies, radio, TV, everything was disco. That was the format. And I think people by 1979 going back to this moment that I just shared right here, okay? Going back to this moment, ladies and gentlemen, that's people who had enough of it. Enough. Okay? They were tired of disco. They were tired of having to hear it. So when that happened, something amazing happened. And this is unbelievable. This had a huge impact because within 2 months, there was almost not a single disco R&B type, really danceable beat song in the top 10 in Billboard. And I just looked it up and it's absolutely, some remarkable because by that point, people were like, okay, this is kind of backfiring. So we're going to step back. The problem with this to me is everybody who got labeled as a disco artist, to me, are not disco. They're R&B funk musicians. They just happen to formula that they've always used to create the music they loved. But to make a marketing point, they just said, okay, we're going to say it's disco and we're going to make all this money because this is disco. And we're gonna have people come out and we're gonna have this person record. Hey, let's get Frank Sinatra. He needs a hit. Let's give him a disco producer. I mean, this was what was going on. But people who were legitimate artists, like the Bee Gees, like Barry White, like Casey and the Sunshine Band, like the Bee Gees, like the Ohio Funk Revolution from Dayton. I'm representing from Dayton. All of these people were making genuine. I'm gonna turn that off because you know what? If I have that music playing, YouTube will be like, no, 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 no. But anyway, so the Ohio funk, Dayton funk music. Yes, I'm representing because I'm from Dayton. These people were making genuine R&B funk music, but because of the time and because of what was going on, what was hot, they got classified as disco. So when people got sick of them, everybody turned their back on these wonderful musicians who did nothing but make the music that made them feel good. Okay. And I feel, yes, the Ohio, like you guys just don't know how much of a connection I have to the Dayton music sound. I really do. So I really feel for this part. And I did a really interesting thing today as I was preparing, doing my last minute preparations for this show today. I did a search for disco artist, okay? And I'm gonna tell you, okay, that and I'm gonna see if I can share my screen. Okay. I'm gonna share my screen with you guys. Check this out. And I'm gonna see if I could do it this way. Okay. See if I can do it this way. I'm gonna take this off. I'm still learning it. Okay. So this is my screen, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. When I typed up disco, look at the artists that come up. Ladies and gentlemen, this is R&B. These are R&B artists. Okay. But because of the music they made back then, they were stuck in the disco era. And I felt like they got so much backlash that was unnecessary because they got wrapped up in what someone called they found a way to make money off of this and they just ran it into the ground. I mean, literally, the Bee Gees had to just disappeared. They did one album in '81 called Living Eyes, and they completely changed everything because they were afraid of the backlash that they was going to get because they were the Bee Gees. They broke up their wonderful band. They used studio musicians. They completely changed their sound, and even that didn't work. So they ended up having to go behind the scenes and write and produce for other artists, and those albums were popular, but they didn't know it was the Bee Gees. Hello, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm getting all worked up talking about disco because I find it fascinating, and I find it to be honestly, at the end of the day, for me, disco was the the establishment's way of opening up R&B and B and funk music to everybody to make them feel comfortable with it. Simple as that, and then they just ran it into the ground. So nobody by that point wanted to deal with it. So even R&B artists had to kind of completely change how they were doing their music. They had to add a lot more syncopation to the music, more of a backbeat. And then, a few groups would still do what they would normally do, but a lot of those groups kind of fell off too. And it's really sad because these were amazing, amazing, amazing artists. Like I love Chic. I love the Bee Gees. I can dance to their music all day. And I'm just happy now that people can appreciate the music that they did produce because the backlash they received was unfair. So, and one example of how this really became just silly, okay? And I'm gonna say this. If you like this song, no shade, okay? If you like it, cool. I can dance to it. The moment you knew that they were really just opening up to anybody was the single Disco Duck, okay? Listen, I try to be objective and I try to find the positives of all music. And I'm gonna tell you right now, oh, I've been doing this for years. Trust me. Just go check out my acapella videos. All that's coming from my mouth. I've done it for years, and I love doing that. But when you go look at Disco Duck, here's my thing. Okay, listen, I'm nice. I love music. I can dance to that. But you can't tell me that they weren't laughing in that control booth as they were putting that together. And the fact that they're laughing not about anything else but what they're doing. See, at that point, it became a parody, and then when you become a parody, it just opens up to anybody. So, my man. So, yes. So I think disco is just basically R&B and funk music that was really marketed as a music style for everybody to use because they were able to put a formula to the music. Yeah, come on. So you telling me, listen, you I'm looking up all of my chat right now. Ohio players, yes, Dayton, love them. Okay. I represent. It is R&B under a new name, okay? And yes, Chic, come on. I love those two. And I'm gonna tell you, those two be getting down. I mean, and they just break it down. And you could tell in the studio when they were playing, they were just jamming. That's one of the best ones. When you got Nile Rodgers and you've got Bernard Edwards just in there, just jamming. And they're just like, and they're just, they going off of each other. And that's the greatest thing about playing this type of music, because you literally can just catch yourself in this. I can't describe it, but when you are in the optimal ideal situation of jamming and everything's coming together. It's such euphoria. And I could tell when they're in the studio making that stuff. Yeah. I mean, if you guys don't know, when they're talking about La Freak, that was a song that was written because they couldn't get in the studio 54. They told them to go away. So they went back to their apartment and they said, "Oh, you Ah, you. And then, Bernard looked at and I was like, man, this is slamming. This is slamming. And they went in and recorded it. So, I'm, yeah. And so disco is unique because this will never happen again. Never. And the reason it'll never happen again is because in today's world, as I was saying earlier, we are able to we have so many more options. If you are sick of something, guess what? You can put yourself in a whole nother atmosphere and you can kind of get yourself recharged and then go back to that. At this point, people, if you get sick of something, you can go somewhere else. There's so many choices for people that this will never happen again. You will never get to a feverish point where people say, stop, stop. If you just say stop now, you just say, okay, I'm just going to listen to the electronica radio. I'm going to listen to the old school radio. I'm going to listen to the R&B radio. I'm going to listen to the Queen radio, the Bee Gees radio. They've got all kind of radio stations or playlists now. So there's so many options on TV. And I believe right now, like even if something catches on as a fad, you still have an option to get out. Back then, there was no out. You had to either watch it or go do something else. And a lot of times, what was something else was probably some more disco. You turn off the radio, go with TV. Oh, they playing a disco record on the intro to Johnny Carson got a disco or Midnight Special. Oh, I can't watch TV. Let me go to a movie. Oh, they're replaying Saturday Night Fever, or they're doing one of those roller derby movies where they playing disco. Oh my gosh. Okay, let me go here. Oh, they're playing disco music in the store. You could not get away from it. And I think people just had enough, especially people who never liked that kind of music. They had enough. So, all right. So that was my rant on disco. I'm glad you guys stay with me because this was something I'd have been talking about for years. I think I hit everything that I wanted to talk about. For my live audience, I see you guys questions. I see you guys typing. So happy you guys are joining me. When you guys write me messages, I just feel really appreciative, and I thank you guys for your support. And I'm gonna tell you, on my birthday, whoo, I got people. You guys showed out, and I was happy. But I was like, "Ooh, I can't get to this." So I'm trying to get to everybody. Trust me, everybody's going to get a response. I'll make sure of that. So if you guys have any questions or anything you guys want to, ask me now, now's the time before I kind of wrap things up. But if you don't get a chance, there, right there. Have your questions answered live. Go to askjelanistokes@gmail.com, and I will always make sure to put that question on the next show for next week. And yes, and then once again, every Tuesday, 6 p.m., we do front row right here. And then every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we always have new videos coming out. So yes, the Bee Gees, KC, and the Sunshine Band, they were awesome bands. And see, these were artists that if you talk to them, Barry Gibb even said it, they never looked at it as disco. They saw it was R&B. All of those artists that I showed on my screen, they were making funk and R&B music. It was never disco. Oh, Earth, Wind, and Fire was put in there too. And for me, I couldn't even put them as any kind of disco. Their music was just on another level. Because to me, I think of, you've got like the Sheiks of the world, you've got the Donna Summers, who were like the divas, you got the Bee Gees, who were like the self-contained brother group. But then you've got the bands. Earth, Wind, and Fire, the Isley Brothers, Ohio Players, Heat Wave, Lakeside, Slave. I can keep going. I can keep going. I can keep going. Those, they all fit in one group. Oh, George Clinton in Parliament. All of those groups are all fit in that. To me, they have their own distinction. And yes, Barry Gibb was I love Barry Gibb. I'm gonna tell you who also I love, and I'm a huge fan of. The more I started listening to the Bee Gees, the more I became a Morris Gibb fan. Morris Gibb was the glue. Okay. He played the bass. Now I'm gonna tell you, I will always fell in love with those bass parts. And when I found out it was Morris, I'm like, dude, that dude's a beast. Because not only does he play guitar, he can play bass and hold that pocket, and he's a piano player. I'm just like, whoa. And he was literally like the backbone of the band because he always let Robin and Barry do more of the singing. And he kind of laid back and he was kind of content to just, support the band where he needed to support. So much love to Morris, and, you know, yeah, that's my favorite. He's a great guy. So, all right. Let's see. Anything else? Well, we're gonna keep this going next Tuesday. We're gonna have another subject, and I'm gonna have my guest coming back. And yes, yes, yes. So, and I'm going to have one of my guests come back and we're going to have another music topic that we're going to talk about. Because on this one, I kind of get all of these thoughts out of my head. I told my mom the other day, I said, this is my platform to just kind of say out loud what is I'm always debating in my head, and just get all of that stuff out of my system. And trust me, I got so many more. But like I said, disco music is great music. The artist, I think at least now it did. No, but you have to understand, like, they had to move away from even that designation of disco. They had to kind of call it that electronic music. I mean, if you think about it, they even changed their instrumentation. For a long time, the a live bass was nowhere to be seen. It was all synth based. Okay. Perfect example. Madonna's in the groove. That would have fit right in the 70s. But when you think of the instrumentation and what they're using a synth bass, they're using drum programming, so they're using a drum machine, and they're doing things a lot differently than what they would have done back in the 70s. So, yes, they had to change the designation. Yes, I would say younger generations are, but I have to struggle with my kids sometimes to play this kind of music because they look at me funny. But I say, listen, I'm going to expose you to this because this is where all of your music comes from, and you need to know where your music comes from, and then from there, you got to know where this music we're talking about comes from, and then so on and so on, and then eventually you get back into the classical times. You talk about Beethoven, and so we're not going to do all those connections today, but yes, you know, it is being appreciated. People are appreciating it, and if anything, they're appreciating it through the samples that current artists are using. They find a song from the 70s, they like the groove, they sample it, and they turn it into something new. I'm not a big fan of sampling, but if that's one way to get people to understand what they're listening to and to give them an introduction or just a way to open the door to learning something new, hey, I'm all for it. But I'm not a sampler. I don't like it. I'd rather you just go write something new. Go be creative. And I think sampling got lazy. You just take the whole track. For example, I love the song, but man, dude, I was like, that's lazy. Men in Black. Now, Will Smith was notorious for sampling. I mean, all of his songs were sampled. Men in Black in particular. He literally took the whole track of Patrice Rushen's "Forget Me Not." It's literally the entire track. I mean, just kind of mixed a little differently. You take out the backgrounds and her leads, and yeah, and then "Summertime" was "Summer Madness" sped up by the Kool and the Gang. Well, I can keep going on and on. And then one of my favorites, The Whispers. Oof, man, don't get me started talking about Solar Records, the sound of Los Angeles. Oh my, you guys gonna keep me on here for an hour talking about this stuff. That is a lovely subject I would love to talk about. I love to talk about Solar Records and the impact they had on kind of the disco and the bridge between disco and the R&B music that we would get to know of in the 80s, because they had a huge part in that transition of getting the R&B music away from the disco tag and kind of getting it back to R&B. So I'll talk about that later. So, all right. So, if you last call for any more questions before I call off. This has been fun. I've enjoyed this and talking about this. And yes and no. I think current artists they hear something, they say, "Oh man, that's kind of cool," but I think sometimes, not all of them. I do think some artists just don't care. I think some people just hear the sound and they don't care about where it came from, the artist, or any of that stuff. I mean, to be honest, when they started sampling it, one of the biggest sampling songs was Rapper's Delight, which was Good Times from Chic. They never credited Chic. And that was like a landmark court case where Chic, Nile Rodgers, and Bernard Edwards had to go to court and prove to court that this was copyright infringement. And eventually that worked. And then that's when they started to credit the original artist for the samples. So now artists love it because they're getting paid again. All right, let me read this one. Which one is the most representative disco song? If you had to name just one to someone who doesn't know disco style at all, that's a hard one. Um, I would say this, and like I said, I cringe to use this title for them because I don't believe it. But if I said you want to hear really good disco music, and I would just use that, "Staying Alive," Bee Gees. I think it's the quintessential. That's what it. If you were talking about the elements of disco, that's what it would be. But to me, that's still R&B music, you know. But that's what I would say. It'd be "Staying Alive." That would be the quintessential because by that point they were on their peak, and that's when I felt like they were really on their top game. I like "You Should Be Dancing," but I think "Staying Alive" really kind of just caught the whole country. "You Should Be Dancing," that's my jam because Mo was getting down on that bass, but "Staying Alive" really kind of, if you think of everything in a macro sense, it really represents what that time was musically and also just kind of what was going on around it. That to me is the song I would say, hey, that's the best one to listen to and then branch out from there. To me, that was the best one. All right. So last call. You guys are wonderful. I enjoyed doing this. So, and I was not planning on being on here for 42 minutes, but when you get me talking about music and I get going, I can't help myself because I love me some music. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love to talk about it. I love to teach it. I love to perform it. I just love being around it because music is a universal language. And I believe music is like one of the main things that can really surround you, comfort you, and help bring you out of your bad days and funks. And I'm gonna tell you, I've had a few. Okay. Yes. Disco Inferno, that's a hot one. Yes. And they talked about how they recorded that and they call it too hot, too loud, and to get that sound. Yes, I would say that. But the only reason I would say Staying Alive is because Disco Inferno, although that's a hot track. I remember playing that in the marching band. I used to actually play bass in the marching band. But the only thing with them is see that group was never super big. That was like their main hit. The Bee Gees were worldwide famous and people know the Bee Gees. So if you start with them, plus I say Staying Alive because you can branch out into all of their other remarkable tracks from there, which gives you the same similar vibe. So Staying Alive going from there is going to really encapsulate you into the Bee Gees. And if you like what they're doing, then that can spread out to all of the other webs within that R&B funk realm. That's where my thinking is as far as for them. Because let's just be honest, they open the door for everybody else to do this type of music. Not their father, not of any fault of their own, but they really allow people to say, wow, we could do this too. Yeah, we could do this music. Which, no offense, some of them could not. No. Oh, whew. Yes. Now, with jive talking, this is actually something, and I had a conversation with a comment earlier. That was actually a combination bass, Moog bass, and that to get that sound. So Maurice played the bass, and then they had the Moog bass played over him, overdubbed it to create that really just ooh, that sound that came out of it. So and those are the great things about recording and playing with sounds and doing certain things, and I love doing that. So that's a great story behind that. All right, so well, I'm going to call it here. This has been fun. We do this every Tuesday at 6 p.m. here all the time. Okay, for front row with Jelani Stokes. Oh my God, I almost forgot my own show. I can't believe that. My. So remember again, if you got any questions, if you already watched this video, please send an email to askjelani@gmail.com. But if you're not an email person, guess what? I didn't leave out Twitter. I got Twitter too. I got some Twitter love. Okay. If you want to send me a picture on Instagram, say hi. I got Instagram as well. And then you can always just send me a boring old message here on YouTube. Okay. But listen, this has been fun. I've enjoyed it. It's been a great time. And yes, let's see, I'm gonna go to this last one. Well, here's the main reason why. I believe once there's actually so much more going on in that whole era. I think that whole era, they people were wilding out. Two words, Studio 54. That's just a small part of it. It became such a just revolt against no more that you know, I think people just kind of really went away. So yes, the EMD, the electric music, that's coming on, the electronica, the groove beat, that kind of stuff. Yes, does come from disco, but it had its own little niche that it never really had a chance to jump back in. And I believe the music that the way they put it together is in such a way that they don't really have there is a formula, but I don't feel like it's such a straight formula that a lot of people can do. All right. And once again, the choices for people musically are completely wide open. So you don't have to get just stuck in that world. So I do believe that's the case for that. And then just, you know, taste change, basically. So, all right. Well, thank you again. This is Front Row with Jelani Stokes every Tuesday at 6 p.m. We do this. This has been much fun. And remember, if you got any questions, go to askjelanistokes@gmail.com. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we have new videos. And then, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if you knew this about me, but I do actually have a Patreon page that you guys, if you would like to come and you would like to just, do something to support me and, just kind of come out and like, all right, let me see what you can do. The link is down below. You can kind of go there. And, eventually what I'm going to plan to do is I'm going to do some special things for my Patreons, and do some private chats and some private videos. If you got a request and you put it on Patreon, I might just go ahead and move that to the top because you requested it. And then you're on there, you're part of my crew. So just want to make sure you guys know that as well. And so go check me out. It's just my name, Jelani Stokes. Pretty simple. And then you'll see my nice smile like this. And then, pick an option. And I appreciate everything you guys do. Thank you so much for you guys' support. This is Jelani Stokes. This is Front Row with Jelani Stokes. Thank you guys again. I've enjoyed this discussion. Man, you guys got me going. But we're going to do it again next Tuesday. But until then, I'm just going to say thank you. Make sure you click, subscribe, and then remember, don't forget to click that notification bell because you know what happens when you do. You're going to get more Jelani, and you're going to know when that new Jelani video comes out. So until then, take care. This is Jelani Stokes. Sign in out. You guys take care. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. This was fun, and I'll see you soon next time.